Chapter 8. Kittering headed at a steady jog towards the Lazy Bar X. With the loss of the tracks he was following, his original intention of going back to the ranch for his horse and pay had reasserted itself. Also, at the back of his mind was the suspicion that the tracks wiped out by the cattle might suddenly reappear at the ranch. A couple hours later, he was cautiously leading Doc Martin's horse through the cottonwoods in the back of the ranch house. He'd come up from the back way, avoiding the corrals and bunkhouse and utilizing the shelter of the trees. From here he couldn't see the cowboys' quarters, and he did not know whether any of them were around or whether they were all out on the range. Lack of cover forbade an investigation, but he wasn't worried about them. His business was with Bates. Steely moved with the skillful noiselessness as he left the horse and swung himself onto the veranda. He could hear indistinct voices coming from the house, and he wanted to be sure whose voices they were before he went barging in. He recognized Bates' rumble as he stepped softly to the door, and at the first clear word that caught his ear, he froze and listened. "You're a fool, Wilding," the rancher growled. "Them tricks, they won't get you no place. Why don't you do like I say? I'm giving you half interest in the ranch with the option of buying my half out." "Including with the Short Hills range?" Wilding's voice was edged with a sneer. "No, not including the Short Hill range. We've been over this before. I gave it to Slocum, and I'm keeping my word. My deal is with you in the Lazy Bar X ranch, without the Short Hills range." "Listen, Bates," Wilding snapped, and his tone was not that of an employee to an employer. "You can't tell me what I'm going to do and what you ain't going to do. You'll do as I say if you don't want trouble. I'm getting half interest with the option of buying you out, and that includes Short Hills. Do you understand that?" There was a moment of silence then, as though the two men were measuring each other, and then Bates asked softly, "Why are you so doggone anxious about that little valley, Wilding? What's your grudge against Slocum?" "It ain't none of your business," Wilding replied shortly. "You can leave Slocum out of it. This deal is between us." "Suppose I say that I gave Slocum the valley, and I'm sticking by it, then what?" "You won't be that loco, Bates. You're out on a limb, and you know it." Bates' voice sank lower, and a vibrating burr of menace cut through it. "Ever figure that something might happen to you if you talk too much?" "Sure," Wilding answered readily. "But the boys are riding with me, too, and we're going to run that damn nester off the range if we have to kill him to do it." "So the boys are in it with you, are they?" "Yep, and it wouldn't be right healthy for you to be stubborn, Bates. You best think it over. No sense beating around the brush. You know what'll happen if I don't get it. I'll be back later on this afternoon." Footsteps moved towards the door. Kittering instantly raised his hand and knocked. He had no desire to be caught listening outside. The door was jerked open by Wilding, and Kittering took in the picture at a glance. The foreman's right arm was in a sling, and he was wearing his gun on his left side. His face, harsh and set, became alive with suspicion and fury as he saw the big cowpuncher. Behind him, Bates was raising from behind the table. A mask of hate and rage was wiped from his face as he saw Kittering, and he stood silent and motionless. Not so Wilding. The foreman uttered a short grunt, and his left hand darted for his gun, and Kittering moved inside the doorway with the deceptive speed of a panther. His fingers closed about the foreman's wrist, his hard elbow ground into Wilding's ribs. The foreman struggled wildly and fiercely, but his left arm was no match for the powerful muscles that were holding him. He cursed in short, explosive breaths. "Wait a minute now, Wilding," Kittering urged. "Quit pitching and I'll turn you loose. I don't want to twist your arm off." "You let go of my arm and I'll blow you." "Wilding!" Bates called sharply. He made rapid strides towards the struggling man. "Stop it!" Reluctantly, the foreman ceased his struggling, and Kittering instantly let him go, but continued to watch him closely. "What are you doing here?" Wilding demanded fiercely. "You get the hell off this ranch before you get perforated, you damned renegade." "Pull your horns in, Wilding," the puncher advised. "I didn't come to pay you a visit. I rode in to get my horse and my pay. I reckon that's all right with you, Mr. Bates?" Bates, who had been watching Wilding as narrowly as Kittering, looked up at the puncher. "Why, sure," he replied. He went to the desk and opened a drawer. "Sorry about all this trouble with the men, Kittering." "Oh, I didn't have any trouble," the cowboy replied with a side glance at the foreman. "Seems to me it was them that had it." "Get your horse and get off the ranch," Wilding said curtly, and he turned towards the door. "Wait a minute," Kittering requested. "Just so that there won't be unpleasantness, I'm asking you and Mr. Bates to walk down to the corrals with me. Seems some of your men don't seem to think too highly of me, and they might think I'm stealing my own horse. I'd hate to have to convince them otherwise. Seems you got enough cripples around here as it is." Wilding looked at him with a murderous glint in his eye, but the ranch owner came forward readily. "Why, certainly, Kittering," he said. "You're right. We don't need any more fighting. Here's your money." Kittering took the bills with a muttered thanks and then stood aside for Bates to pass out. The three stepped out onto the veranda together so that a casual onlooker might have thought that they were the best of friends, but the atmosphere between them crackled as they were charged. Kittering led Doc Martin's horse, and they walked down to the corrals. "I'm going to leave this horse here," Kittering explained. "Doc Martin, he'll come around and get him in a few days." As they neared the corral, Patch trotted out from among the other horses. His ears shot up and he nickered. The two men sauntered out from one of the sheds and then halted in a sudden alert attention as they saw the three approaching. Their right hands dropped instinctively towards their gun butts, but they remained there undecided. Kittering was the only one in the group who seemed at ease. He removed the corral bars and then stepped inside. The horses began to mill, all except Patch, who trotted up and nuzzled him. Kittering led the pony out, and as he went, his nostrils flared, and he bowed his head to hide the sharp gleam in his eyes. His quick glance had tested the tracks in the corral dust, and in a quick few steps that led him to the gate he had picked up a big buckskin as the horse who was making the tracks that he had seen at Box Elder Valley. It was Kittering's horse. A cowboy brought Kittering's saddle from the barn in response to a sullen order from the foreman, and he dropped the bundle of supplies that was bought in High Springs beside it. They stood by in silence, watching him saddle his horse. As his hands dealt with the straps, Kittering's mind was busy on the information he had picked out of the dust in the corral. Was it really Wilding who had tried to shoot Slocum? Although the shape seen through the leaves had been familiar, it hadn't struck him at the time that it resembled Wilding, and furthermore, Wilding's arm was still out of commission. Or was the sling merely a camouflage? He thought not, remembering how his bullet had struck the foreman's arm as he drew his gun in the doorway. Had someone else borrowed Wilding's horse so that in case anything went wrong, the blame would fall on the foreman? And who would that be? His mind darted back immediately to the quarrel he had just overheard. Bates? Well, that would be way off trail. Bates and Wilding had quarreled, but that was after the ambush, and besides, they were quarreling over Slocum. Bates was trying to protect Slocum. It didn't sound reasonable that he would try and shoot him, then ride home and take his part in an argument with a man who was also trying to get rid of him. Kittering lashed his bundle on behind the saddle and then mounted. The men watched him impassively. He nodded to them, and then, "So long," he said to Bates, and then rode off. They watched him until he dropped from sight over the rise in the prairie. Patch was in high spirits at being back with his owner, but Kittering didn't seem to share his joy. The puncher was now completely at a loss. He puzzled over the latest threads that wove themselves into this mystery. Wilding and Bates, not rancher and foreman, but partners, yet working against one another instead of together. Wilding knew something about Bates and held it over the owner's head, and to keep him from talking, Bates offered him a half interest in the Lazy Bar X. It might be worthwhile to try and find out what it was that Wilding knew about Bates, but the partner was not sure how to go about getting such information, nor did he want to leave Short Hills for anything. Well, maybe Doc Martin could find out. The real puzzle here was Wilding's insistence upon including Box Elder Valley in the deal, an insignificant dot of land compared to the rest of the huge ranch. What unseen connection ran behind and between Wilding and Slocum? Why did Wilding hate Slocum so much that he was determined to get rid of him, even at the cost of an open break with Bates? Was it Wilding, after all, who had ambushed Slocum? Then Kittering remembered the rifle. If it were Wilding's rifle, it was still possible that whoever had stolen his horse had stolen the rifle as well. But if it was someone else's rifle, then it would prove definitively that someone else had simply used Wilding's horse to throw the blame upon the foreman, and it might tell him who that someone was. "Reckon I best ride back and get that rifle," Kittering decided, and he urged Patch towards Short Hills. Avoiding the pass, he climbed over the hill and rode up, following the track he had made coming down a few hours earlier. And thus he missed the tracks in the pass which would have told him a graphic story. From the top of the hill he looked down into the valley, and quiet had descended upon it again. A horse grazed in front of the cabin, and even at that distance he guessed it was Doc Martin's. Then he turned his attention to looking for the broken rifle, and although he searched for over an hour, he could find no trace of it. He guessed that Slocum must have picked it up, and although there were no tracks on the pine needle floor, looking around aimlessly, he was suddenly aroused by a long halloo down into the valley. He scrambled to a point from where he could see the cabin. Doc Martin was standing before the doorway, shading his eyes with his hands and gazing down the valley. At intervals he called, and to Kittering's surprise he was calling for Slocum. The puncher watched curiously. Apparently Slocum must have been gone for quite some time if they were beginning to get kind of anxious about him, and if he wasn't in the valley, Kittering was sure of that, what was going on now? Doc Martin went into the cabin and reappeared with a rifle which he fired into the air, and then he listened and yelled again, and after an interval fired the rifle again. Convinced now that something was wrong, Kittering caught his horse and headed down to the cabin. Doc Martin had gone back inside, but he came out at the sound of Patch's hoofs. For a second he looked disappointed as he recognized Kittering, then he walked out towards him. "Did you see Slocum?" he demanded. Kittering shook his head. "No. Did he stray off the range?" he asked. Doc Martin peered at him. "He went out about 4 hours ago to see if it was you or someone else that was shooting at him from back up on the hill, and he didn't come back. Helen's worried, and so am I, and I can't leave her alone here." Kittering swung the leg over the saddle horn. "Did you see him, Doc?" "Yeah." "He told you he was going up on the hill to look for tracks? Did he have a busted rifle with him?" "Yes, he did," the doc answered. "Was it yours?" His glance was keen. "No," the puncher replied, "but I'd sure like to know whose it was." In turn sentences he outlined the morning's events on the hill, and Doc Martin nodded. "Well, I've heard Slocum's end of it." "If I could find out who was packing that gun," Kittering said, "I'd know for sure if it was Wilding or someone else. He was from the Lazy Bar X anyways. No one else can have gotten that horse." "Kittering? Jim Kittering?" A faint but clear voice rang inside the dimness of the cabin. "Come in here. I heard every word you said, and I need to talk to you." Kittering stiffened. A deep crimson mantle crept up his throat and engulfed his ears. Awkwardly and sheepishly he swung down off his horse and then tramped through the doorway. Doc Martin caught his arm. "Hold on a minute," he ordered, and then in a low tone. "Jim, I gotta get back to High Springs. Stay with Helen until her father comes back, and if he doesn't show up soon—" He broke off and chewing his underlip. "I don't know what to do. Tell you what, I'll come back tonight. If he isn't here, I'll stay all night, and you better do some searching. You go on now, and don't be afraid. I've boosted your stock with the girl." He gave Kittering a light push, and then called out to Helen that he was coming back later, and then he went to his horse. Left alone, Kittering entered the little cabin with slow steps, and in the doorway of Helen's room he stopped, while his eyes, dazzling from the bright sunlight, came used to the dim light. Gradually he made out the figure of the girl on her pillows, and even in her weakness her face glowed with her own vivid beauty. He fumbled with his hat and looked around helplessly. "Pull up that chair, Jim," she ordered, and he did so awkwardly, and then perched himself upon it on its extreme edge. I sure hope that you're feeling better," he managed. "Oh, I am," she laughed. "I want you to know, first of all, that I'm not holding no hard feelings against you for shooting me. It wasn't your fault, and you squared things by bringing the doctor when no one else would send for him. Will you shake hands?" A delighted grin broke over Kittering's face as he took her hand. She was square, all right. "Now, talk. There's plenty that I want to know about this business." "Well, ma'am," he said, "there ain't so much as I know for sure, and I reckon there's some of my guesses that are probably plumb loco, but I can tell you what I've seen and heard." He felt his awkwardness evaporate as he talked. The girl was so warm and friendly. She listened so intently and applauded him with her eyes, and encouraged him to go on when he stumbled, when he found himself at his ease and speaking naturally. She gave him an exuberant confidence in himself. When finally he stopped, she put her hand on him again. "Jim, I don't know any way to thank you. To take on a job like that, to buck the whole Lazy Bar X outfit for people you don't know and who even tried to shoot you." His embarrassment returned immediately. "Oh, shucks, ain't after getting mixed up like I did, I just couldn't ride off. I kind of owed it to you and your dad to—" "Jim," she said, "where do you think he could have gone? He said he was just going up the hill, but he mentioned something about taking that rifle to Mr. Bates and asking him who it was. Do you think he could have gone to the Lazy Bar X?" Kittering shook his head. "I didn't meet him on the way back," he said. Maybe." He broke off, and then raised his head and listened. "Horse is coming," he said shortly, and then rose to his feet. More than one horse coming this way could mean only one thing: trouble. End of chapter 8.